All right, our recording is in progress. Good evening, Howard County Democratic Central Committee. Thank you for joining us today for our monthly scheduled Howard County Democratic Central Committee meeting. Today is our second episode in our Meet the Governor candidate series. As you remember, last month we met with candidate for Governor Shwani Jain. Next month we'll be meeting with candidate for Governor John King, but today we are very excited to meet candidate for Governor, Comptroller Peter Franchot, who's been elected Comptroller 3 times with a vast amount of experience in the role. And today we're going to hear a little bit about his vision for Maryland. We're going to offer Comptroller about 10 minutes to state his case to us and talk about the work he will be doing. And then we'll be offering about 5 minutes to the Central Committee to offer up some Q&A follow-up questions for the Comptroller. So with that said, Comptroller, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Shahan, and thanks everybody for being here. It's a very distinguished group. Let me start by giving you my cell phone number. I give it to prominent Marylanders of stature like all of you. So if you want to write it down, it's 301 area code 332-1961. You can text me, you can voicemail me. If you're in my contact list, I will answer the phone once I see your name come up. I do this because, frankly, I think as a statewide official, I want to have eyes and ears out in each of the counties. I want to have people be able to communicate good ideas, or if you have really big complaints about things like not being able to get through to the unemployment division and get basic questions answered, we can help sometimes from the sideline, even though that's not our agency, for example. But 301-332-1961, just by way of background, I am a New Englander by birth, went to school up in Amherst and Northeastern, et cetera, up in New England. But I got my start in politics when at Amherst College in my sophomore year, I dropped out. It was 1968 to work for Gene McCarthy, who was running for president of the United States on the anti-Vietnam War platform. He was considered a lost ball in high grass and absolutely irrelevant, running against Lyndon Baines Johnson, who kind of reminds me of William Donald Schaefer now that I think of it. But Johnson was considered unbeatable. Well, all of us college kids who went over full time for McCarthy, we organized the college campuses. He did very well in New Hampshire. Johnson dropped out. McCarthy went on to it was a very rocky period for our country because Bobby Kennedy was shot and Martin Luther King was shot, and the Vietnam War was like, if you think the country's divided now, back in 1968, 1969, it was pretty significant back then too. Anyway, I unexpectedly got drafted because I didn't realize I'd given up my student deferment. But I spent 2 years in the Army. That proved to be a very good experience for me. I went back, finished Amherst, went to Vermont, started a small environmental group, Vermont Tomorrow. Didn't found it, but I was the $50 a week executive director. That was terrific. I lobbied the legislature. Then I worked for Ralph Nader Group for a year or two. Then I went to Northeastern Law School. There I met Henry Kendall and Dan Ford, who had formed the Union of Concerned Scientists, an anti-nuclear organization, still exists. They hired me after law school and sent me down to Washington as a lobbyist. I didn't know anything about Washington. And in fact, 3 Mile Island happened 2 weeks after I arrived. So I became a kind of instant expert. Anyway, in a year or so, I met a young congressman named Ed Markey, who I was lobbying on anti-nuclear issues. And he hired me as his staff director. And that's the first real meaty experience I had as a director of a Washington and a Boston office for Ed Markey, who subsequently and currently is the US Senator from Massachusetts. That was a very good experience for me. And, that was good, very solid democratic principles and values, et cetera, that we were all working on. I, in 1986, left that and ran for the House of Delegates from Silver Spring and Tacoma Park. I was, once again, a lost ball in high grass is how I was described. There were 11 of us running. I finished number 1, 1,000 votes ahead of Sheila Hickson, the longtime incumbent delegate. And I spent 20 years as a member of the Appropriations Committee, chaired the subcommittee on transportation and the environment. I then decided that I needed to get out of politics because frankly, I was kind of been there, done that. I found it very difficult because everybody was nice to me and they held the door for me and they said, Mr. Chairman, how are you? This, that, and the other thing. And we did some exciting projects, and Strathmore, for example, was something that I had a significant role in. But I said, well, here's how I'll get out of politics gracefully. I'll run against William Donald Schaefer, the 4-time mayor, 2-term governor, 2-term incumbent comptroller. And I'll get kicked really hard, but I'll run a good campaign. I'll look good. People will pat me on the back, and I will gracefully be retired by the Babe Ruth of Maryland politics. Well, long story short, I won. Frankly, with your help, I think the Democratic Club in Columbia and the Howard County was crucial to my surprise victory in the primary. And I have served 14 years as your comptroller. What I've tried to do is give people less rhetoric and more results. I've tried to give folks honest, proven leadership that is credible, that has deliverables, focused on respecting the taxpayers, responding to the taxpayers, getting results for the taxpayer. We've completely revamped the 1,150 person agency into the nation's leading tax administration agency, revamped the infrastructure, revamped the culture of the agency, and we now return 3.5 million tax refunds within 2.5 business days. That's over $3 billion in relief that we provide every year at start of tax season. We answer 800,000 phone calls from frustrated taxpayers. They have all sorts of questions. We answer them within 40 seconds with a live, friendly, professional voice. I mention these things not because I'm trying to take credit. The staff basically did it under my leadership, but it required years of we are putting in a whole $160 million infrastructure system to make the e-filing system more user-friendly. All of this requires planning and strategy and management and allocation of resources and et cetera, et cetera. And that's what I think the Democratic Party is interested in this year or next year in the gubernatorial primary and in the general election. So I've run 4 times statewide. Last time I got more votes than any other Democrat, any other candidate in for statewide office in state history, other than 1 year the federal level during the presidential election. 1.6 million votes. I get hundreds of thousands of independent and Republican votes in addition to Democratic votes. And that's because I'm seen as a honest, proven leader who actually is not just eloquently telling you what the vision for Maryland is, but is actually producing pragmatic, progressive improvement in the state and the quality of life of our Marylanders. I plan to take that to the governor's office. I'll stop for a moment because I'm sure I'm running over my 10 minutes, and Shahan, you can MC and get people to answer questions. I'm frankly much more interested in your thoughts. I have a couple of things that I'd like to ask you guys what your thoughts are. But why don't I step aside for a second and let me hear from you. Thanks, Shahan. I didn't mean to cut it off. I just felt like I was going on and on like some aimless politician. And you know, I used to kid Steny Hoyer. I said the thing I feared most was sitting in a conference like this with Steny Hoyer and having him start by saying, I'm only going to speak briefly. At that point, I was like, uh-oh, here we go. Because, you know, Steny's a fabulous member of Congress. But I will say that I'm tremendously pleased, I think, along with, you know, almost 100% of all Democrats and many, many, many Republicans and independents and Joe Biden. I think he's provided stable, competent leadership. And that's my brand if you, you know, want to attach a label to me. Thank you.
Well,
Shahan, Tim has his hand up first and then Jessica.
Thank you, Regina. Thank you, Comptroller. Look, we aim to make a organic session here. This isn't a pressure situation. I mean, although you are running for governor, but we do know that we appreciate your time and we appreciate you collaborating with us and being here. Just wanted to put that out there.
I feel like I'm running for, like I ran against Schaefer though, because I kind of, when I told my wife I'm running for governor, she said, good, you're going to lose and then we can get back into a relatively normal life. It's the same thing she said with Schaefer, unfortunately, for her desire for my retirement. But we'll see. I'm picking up a tremendous amount of support though, and I'm very grateful for that. And I'm not sure any other elected official holding current office is going to get in. I mean, for some reason, the big guns are staying out. Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I think we've got some Central Committee members that are certainly ready for questions. We'll start with Ms. Jessica Nichols with the first question. Jessica, go ahead.
Tim was actually before me. I don't want to jump in the line.
He's on deck.
Go ahead,
That's
Tim.
okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tim.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, sir, for joining us tonight and also for joining us in our fundraiser last week. It was great to have you with us.
A wonderful event. I enjoyed it a lot.
It was good. And I was also really grateful to learn more about your history. Although as probably one of the few on our committee who can actually remember the late 60s, you know, still glad to learn about your history. Although if you can remember the 60s, you really weren't there, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So I was also glad to hear about your background with the environmental organization in Vermont, also the Union of Concerned Scientists. Climate change is an issue very near and dear to my heart for a lot of different reasons. And I am just curious to know what your vision is for how Maryland, as one of the most vulnerable states to the impacts of climate change, can really be a true leader in tackling the crisis that we now have with climate, and how we can advance climate justice and create jobs and really demystify the notion that tackling the climate crisis is necessarily problematic for our economy. Because I think President Biden is showing that we can make these investments, but I'm just curious to know what your vision is for how Maryland might tackle this problem. Thank you.
You know, I travel around the state all the time. The last 14 years, I've visited 10,000 small businesses. I try to go to every nook and cranny of the state. In the far western part of the state, they're very dependent upon the coal industry. So I've sat down with the coal companies just to find out what their thinking is. And they say, well, Franchot, we see you as kind of a Montgomery County liberal, but you know, you've been kind of okay as comptroller. Here's what our plan is. I said, really? Okay, tell me what your plan is. They said, we are more pro-solar than you are. We are putting all 100% of our future and our research into solar and renewables. I said, really? But you're the coal industry. They said, yeah, but we're intelligent people and we're rational people and we're going to make adjustments. And I think when you read about Volvo and GM by 2030, turning all their automobile fleets, apparently, into electric vehicles. I mean, these are big companies dependent upon the oil and gas industry, I guess, for their vehicles. Well, I think that we can partner and make change a lot faster than even has been anticipated by the Biden administration. And I'm pledging to people that we're going to have, on day one as governor, I'm going to announce that every state facility in the state will only use renewable energy for its electricity and for its fuel. Secondly, that the entire fleet, once and for all, we keep talking about the state fleet of vehicles, will be turned electric. So thirdly, within 4 years, we will stop being an importer of electrical and other energy from outside of the state. We will become an exporter of energy from Maryland, all of it produced by renewables. So that's a pretty ambitious plan. The question is, can you deliver on that? I claim that based on my obsession with not just wishful thinking and good intentions and great eloquent rhetoric, but actual implementation of things. For example, what I've done in the comptroller's office, I'm going to be able to do that. And along with it, obviously, come jobs. I've committed to 100,000 new jobs for trade unions, particularly in the first 100 weeks of my candidacy. A lot of those are going to come from geothermal and solar and wind, both land and at sea, and use of renewables. I also intend to invest heavily, since we have a significant amount of untapped debt capacity in the state. We are the wealthiest state in the country. And we've been more or less careful, but we have a considerable amount of debt capacity. And I intend to draw on some of that to invest in the latest carbon capture technology. I'm not sure what that's going to be. Probably will be tested out in Oregon and British Columbia before I even understand what it is. But we're going to be sucking carbon out of the atmosphere and making up for the pollution that we have put in the atmosphere over the last 100 years. So I consider that to be a pretty transformative schedule. It's frankly, maybe a little bit ambitious, but I also have committed to 1 billion adult oysters that we're going to place in the Chesapeake Bay. They each filter 50 to 60 gallons of water. We're going to do a $10 million international competition to develop affordable, practical, pragmatic solutions to the Bay's dead zones, which are a big problem, as you know, from the environmental growth of algae dropping to the bottom and turning into, these dead zones where there's no oxygen. Well, we're going to solve that. And then finally, I'm going to work with, obviously, the EPA, but the federal government. Ron Klain, the chief of staff for Joe Biden, was my first hire in Ed Markey's office a long time ago. He doesn't answer my calls because he's so important now, but trust me, we have some good connections, and we have to rely upon, frankly, the federal government to help us manage Pennsylvania and New York's runoff into the Bay. So my environmental roots are strong, but I'm not interested in just keeping doing what we've been doing, because we're kind of standing still. We're not losing a lot of ground other than on the climate issue, but the Bay is kind of not getting better, even though we're spending $500 million a year. So I intend to change that and inject some creativity. I'd love to partner with you guys and work with you on it, because as you know, the Bay's health depends in part on the runoff from the entire state. Thank you. That's a good question. And you can probably suggest some other components that would be even more visionary than that. But I try to think of myself as someone who's going to under-promise and over-deliver. And on this issue, that's where I'm going to be. And thank you for asking it.
Thank you.
So Comptroller, just from the respect of time and to some of the time we've been offering other candidates, we're going to take one more question, and then we're going to conclude the session. So Ms. Nichols, if you have your question, go ahead, please.
I sure do. Thank you so much, Comptroller, for taking my question. I am not only a member of the Democratic Central Committee in Howard County, but I am also a very proud Howard County public school teacher. And as one of the thousands of public school teachers, we face an inequitable situation. I teach in Howard County, which has a lot of resources, but even in Howard County, there is a vast difference between outcomes, and the outcomes very much depend on the financial wherewithal of the zip code that your school is in. And so I want to ask you what I've asked all the other candidates that have come through, knowing that your zip code really does depend on the funding of your school. What is your plan to ensure educational equity in our Maryland educational system?
Well, that's a great question. I've been a little skeptical of the Kerwin plan, because it's one of these plans that it's hardly even identified as Kerwin. It's just a $4 billion plan to help K through 12 education. I was in the legislature when we passed Thornton. That was something that was smaller. It was half of Kerwin, $2 billion. But I remember asking Kathleen Kennedy, not Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, she was the lieutenant governor then, but one of the leaders of the bill on the floor, how are we going to pay for it? And they said, don't worry, Kathleen's running for governor. And I said, oh, that's great, next year, and she'll win. And she's going to raise the sales tax by a penny. Well, that didn't happen. And we ended up struggling fiscally with the commitments. And we never quite got the results that we all hoped for. So I'm perfectly open-minded on Kerwin to test some of the proposals on a pilot basis and see what works and what gets good results in Maryland schools, and scale those up where appropriate. I'm much more excited, though, about doing some things such as, number one, restoring the joy of teaching to teachers. I mean, so many rank and file teachers tell me the standardized testing has just sucked the joy out of teaching, and it's just become a fetish. So I could see ratcheting back the standardized testing way back, just so we pass the federal requirements. But basically liberating teachers to teach, number one. Number two, I like the idea, rather of spending billions of dollars on this, that, and the other thing. I'm much more interested in curriculum reform that will allow the kids and the teachers to interact, where the kids are motivated to learn and the kids are motivated to teach other kids where they're getting to. And I'm talking about some of these creative curriculum reforms that can really result in kids, A, getting more skill, getting more knowledge about the economy and the society that they're going to go into, whether they're going to go work directly or whether they're going to go to community college or go to college and then on to graduate school. I want kids to have skills and knowledge about how to cope and how to succeed. And I most importantly want them to have self-confidence. I want them to have self-confidence. Even if they don't have, so I'll hire a kid that's got half the ability of another young person. If they're all in and they give me everything they've got, that to me is successful K through 12 education. It's a little fuzzy for you guys, but junior achievement has had a lot of success around the country. Some nonprofits have with curriculum reform. I like that because it's much more affordable and controllable. And once again, it's approaching education from a less of a kind of a top-down approach and more from a bottom-up. I don't mean to suggest that poverty and low wages and where you live and what your race is and what the traumas are that you face are not also part of the equation. And obviously over the years, I've been a very, very solid Democrat in supporting MBE programs, HBCUs, the historic colleges, doing whatever we can to bring facilities in low-wage earning zip codes up to the same standards that we have at some of the best schools in Howard and Montgomery. Frankly, there are kids in Baltimore City that have to wear parkas during the winter because it's classroom's freezing, and they have to, they can hardly breathe during the hot days because there's no air conditioning. And so I'm the type of Democratic governor that A, is you're going to have my cell phone so you can hold my feet to the fire. B, we're going to deal with this and make progress. And I'll just conclude by saying I met a couple of years ago with the Kiwanis Club in Silver Spring, my old legislative district. Said, how are you guys doing? These were all the local business owners. They said, God, we're really excited because we adopted a year ago an elementary school and a middle school that were underachieving in Silver Spring. Guess what we did? I said, I don't know, what'd you do? They said, we set up a library. They gave us a room in each school. We set up our own library, bought all the books, staffed it with our volunteers and our business owners. And we read to the kids and we taught them reading. Guess what? Their reading scores went way, way up. I mean, teaching a kid to read, it's not so much how to read. I just want to make sure kids can read. And I don't mean to get excited about it, but I think there's so much motivation and energy that we leave untapped. And I plan to unlock some of it. And I'm not opposed to paying teachers $60,000 a year starting salary. I just don't want to start there because all of a sudden we're validating and embedding the current system. Don't get me wrong, I'm in favor of higher salaries. But what I'd like to do is deal with the with the inadequacies of the system, even if it's fully funded. And I think I can do it. I think I could, obviously, you could help me if you're free. I'm not free. I mean, if you free up some time down the road. But seriously, I think we can do transformative change for K through 12 education. And I would like to have you guys give me a chance to step up to the plate and show you that it's doable. Thank you. Great question.
Thank you, Jessica, for the question. Comptroller, we thank you so much for your time, sir. That is going to conclude our interview. We thank you so much for leaving your number here. Please don't butt dial the comptroller, ladies and gentlemen. Only call.
Yeah, been there, done that. Yeah, okay. Don't worry about it, guys. I really enjoyed it. I didn't really mention how much I love Howard County, how often I get up there, but it's a very special place in our state. And I have a great deal of affection for you guys because you're kind of the economic breadbasket. You used to be the real breadbasket during the Revolutionary War. Now you're the kind of the ground zero for prosperity and affluence and success and prosperity. So good luck to everybody, and call me if you need me.
I'll call you tonight about 3 a.m.
Oh my God, no, don't do that, please. Yeah, call Larry Hogan. Call Larry Hogan at 3 o'clock.
Oh God,
Yeah, I'll see you. Take care.
Thank you, Comptroller. Appreciate it, everybody. Thank you.
Take care.
All right, folks, so that will conclude our episode 2. Join in for episode 3 when we will be meeting with candidate for governor, former Obama Education Secretary John King. Thank you.